The transport ship Vraxian Talon descended through the gray-green atmosphere of New Thessalon, a remote human colony on the edge of the outer fringe. Through the reinforced viewport, Commander Koresh of the Black Fangs watched rolling hills and dense forest slip beneath them. His eyes narrowed with practiced calculation. Scanners show minimal defense systems, reported the ship's pilot, a scaly Osari named Krilln. No orbital weapons, no patrol signals, no resistance detected. Koresh leaned back into his seat, his heavy armor creaking. Typical. Humans build fast, expand fast, and forget protection. We'll be back on Dinar Station by cycle's end. Around him, the rest of the mercenary crew exchanged smirks. They had seen this before. Colonies abandoned by larger powers, left vulnerable. Easy credits for those willing to do the dirty work. New Thessalon wasn't even on the main trade maps. No military, no allies. Just another dot ready to be crossed out. Still feels strange, said Fosk, one of the younger crew members. His voice was quiet beneath his helmet. The colony sent no distress call. No sign of panic or defense activation. Doesn't that seem too easy? Koresh gave him a brief look. You think the prey should scream first? No, sir, Fosk said quickly. It's just, you'll learn. Humans can be clever, but they're predictable. The ship touched down outside the colony perimeter with a soft hiss of steam. The doors opened, revealing a windless plain and tall, unmoving trees. No birds, no sound. Only the dull buzz of the ship's systems hummed in the background. The squad disembarked in formation. The buildings of New Thessalon stood in the distance, clean and structured, as if untouched. No smoke, no signs of struggle. This place is too clean, muttered Dravik. The demolitions expert. Where's the damage? Where are the signs of panic? Maybe they packed up and ran, offered another merc. Or maybe they knew we were coming, Fosk said, scanning the tree line. Koresh waved them forward. Move in, sweep the area. Mark everything of value for extraction. They began their approach toward the colony structures. The path between the trees was oddly symmetrical. Even the undergrowth seemed managed, like it had been cleared recently. Suddenly, the air shifted. A faint click. The mercs froze. Before anyone could speak, a loud crack echoed through the woods. A small explosive buried under the soil erupted beneath the forward squad, sending two mercenaries tumbling backward in a cloud of dirt and smoke. Ambush! Shouted Koresh, but no enemy appeared. Instead, voice crackled over their helmets, shared comm channel. .com, neutral. You've entered restricted space. Turn back. The voice didn't shout. It didn't threaten. But it stopped every mercenary. In their tracks, Koresh snapped to the tech officer, who patched into our private channel. No signal trace, Commander. They're inside our systems. Fosk's helmet scanner flickered. His HUD glitched for a brief second, then stabilized. He turned slowly, feeling the eyes on them, though no one was visible. It's quiet, he said softly. Too quiet. Another explosion, this time behind them. Their landing zone. A plume of fire rose in the distance. Someone just took out our ship, reported Krilln, staring wide-eyed at the growing smoke. Koresh clenched his fists. No more games. Find whoever did this. We're not leaving until they answer for it. But Fosk stayed still, eyes locked on the trees. In one of the upper branches, he thought he saw something moved just for a second. A figure, cloaked in gray, watching. And then it was gone. Another message echoed in their ears. This is your final warning. Koresh activated his pulse rifle. They want to scare us. Let's show them who we are. But as they moved forward, none of them noticed the small, blinking devices now embedded in their armor, seams placed silently, surgically, without a sound. Fosk didn't notice something else, though. A tree ahead had a marking etched into its bark. Symbol. One he didn't recognize. It wasn't alien. It was human. The forest pressed in tighter as the mercenaries advanced, the branches seeming to lean inward with quiet intent. Fosk moved near the middle of the squad, pulse rifle steady, eyes flicking from tree to tree. Number? Sign of movement. No heat signatures. Nothing at all. Too much nothing. Koresh held up a fist, and the group halted. His visor scanned the path ahead, mapping the terrain with military precision. Something's off, he muttered. Sweep for traps. Dravik crouched low and activated his sensor wand. A dull green pulse flickered across the forest floor. But instead of clear readings, his device fuzzed into static. It's jamming out, he said, tapping the screen. Nothing but interference. Koresh narrowed his eyes. Local tech. No way humans in a backwater like this have the gear to a sharp snap crack through the air, before anyone could react. A cable whipped from a nearby tree and yanked a mercenary into the canopy. No shout, no struggle, just gone. Fosk spun and pointed his rifle upward. Top left. Movement in the trees. He fired, but the beam struck empty branches. Another merc vanished behind them with a muffled grunt. Then another. Panic set in. The squad broke formation. Training kicked in, but it was being overwhelmed by the primal fear creeping into their minds. Something was watching them, many somethings, and whatever it was knew this terrain far better than they did. Circle up, Koresh ordered. Cover each sector. No gaps. Their perimeter tightened, rifles aimed outward. Wind moved through the trees like a whisper, brushing against their armor. Then it happened again. The voice returned, calm and even. Leave now. This is your only path to safety. Fosk checked his helmet. Still no source on that signal? Nothing. There comes tech replied. They're not broadcasting from any known frequency. It's being fed directly into our suits. Is that even possible? Fosk asked. The tech shook his head. It shouldn't be. A deep hum suddenly filled the air. At first it sounded like insects, but it grew deeper, heavier, a pulse of sound that made their armor vibrate. One of the mercenaries screamed and tore off his helmet. I'm hearing things there in my head. Before Koresh could respond, a low thud echoed across the clearing. Everyone froze. A body dropped from the trees. It was their missing scout from earlier. He was alive, barely. His armor was intact, but every weapon had been removed. Carefully, systematically, etched across the chest plate using a laser cutter, was a single word. Welcome. Koresh knelt to inspect the soldier. He was unconscious, but breathing. Faint scratches lined the back of his helmet, too small to be claws, too straight to be accidental. Fosk stepped back. This isn't an attack. It's a message. Koresh stood, fists clenched. They're playing games. No, Fosk said. They're making a point. Another flicker moved in the trees. A shadow darted from branch to branch, too quick to track. Someone fired, but the shadow was already gone. Koresh looked around. We can't fight shadows. Regroup and fall back to the ship. There was a long pause. Then Krilln's voice came over the channel. Commander, the ship's gone. What? Nothing but a crater where we landed. Debris everywhere. Number? Explosion detected on seismic. It just disappeared. Koresh's face hardened behind his helmet. Fine. Then we find there comes a ray. We send a signal out. Fosk stepped beside him, voice low. What if they don't have one? Koresh looked at him. What if this isn't a colony at all? Fosk continued. What if the whole settlement is just bait? They all fell silent. The forest around them rustled again. With wind, but with something moving. Many somethings. From Deep in the trees, dozens of red lights blinked to life. They weren't eyes, they were sensors, targeting sensors. Then, for the first time since landing, Riker spoke not over the comms, but aloud, unseen. "We don't want you destroyed. We want you afraid." The lights vanished just as quickly as they had appeared, swallowed by the shadows of the forest. For a long moment, the Black Fangs stood frozen, weapons ready, barely breathing. Nothing came, no gunfire, no charge, no movement, just the trees, rustling in a wind that hadn't been there moments before. "They could have wiped us out just now." Fosk whispered. Karesh didn't respond. His mind raced. All his tactical experience told him they were being manipulated, cornered slowly, piece by piece. This was no random group of scavenger colonists. This was coordination, timing, precision, professional eyes. "Up," he ordered. "We keep moving. North Ridge, high ground." The squad moved out, nerves stretched thin. Every step felt heavier, every branch overhead a threat. As they passed the edge of the forest into the lower hills beyond, something new came into view. Buildings, more structures, military grade, hidden from orbit. Low profile, camouflaged into the terrain. A bunker, unmarked, clean, still powered, Dravik. Approached the door and ran a decryption sweep. No external lock, just a manual code input. Not common in outer colonies. Karesh stepped forward, scanned the keypad, and made a decision. "We breach." The door hissed open slowly. A single hallway stretched into darkness beyond inside. The air was still. Lights flickered to life as motion sensors activated. The squad advanced carefully through the narrow corridor. Weapons raised. Along the walls were photos, black, canned white portraits. Old military patches, faded digital maps of human space. Symbols, none of them recognized. Then Fosk stopped at a nameplate mounted near a sealed command room. "Echo Team, Unit 9C. Karesh looked over his shoulder. "That name means something to you?" Fosk nodded slowly. There was a rumor back during the Denari uprisings about a human squad trained for containment and disruption. Never confirmed, no official records. They weren't made to fight wars. They were made to end them before they began. Karesh stepped closer to the plaque. "That's a myth. Maybe," Fosk said. "But we're standing in their bunker." The door behind them shut without a sound. The lights dimmed. A holoprojector in the command room activated. Static filled the air, and then a figure appeared. Tall human wearing old-world combat armor. One eye was replaced by a glowing lens, scanning the room as if it could see them. He spoke with no anger. No threat, just certainty. "To those who find this place, understand this. You were not meant to be here. This ground is not protected by walls, but by memory. And by those who remember what happens when we are forgotten." The image flickered. The projection zoomed out, showing combat footage. Human soldiers moving through forest terrain in complete silence. Disabling alien walkers, taking down patrols with non-lethal precision. Always fast, always invisible. Karesh watched in disbelief. "They're not fighting to win," he muttered. "They're fighting to scare." Fosk nodded. "Because fear travels farther than fire." Another part of the footage showed a squad planting decoys, rerouting comm signals, using outdated tech in unpredictable ways. Simple tools used with creative brilliance. "No wonder we never saw them," Krilln said. "They're not using standard tactics. They're rewriting the battlefield." Suddenly, the projector cut to black. A final line of text appeared on screen. "You may leave now. The path has been cleared. But you will carry this memory with you. We are still here." Karesh turned back to the sealed door. It opened on its own, light spilled out into the corridor behind them. Outside, the forest was quiet. Once again. Not threatening, just waiting. Koresh looked at Fosk. "We're dealing with professionals." "No," Fosk said, his voice tight. "We're dealing with ghosts." Far above, watching from a hidden ridge, Captain Riker stood beside a tree, one hand resting on his helmet. Around him, silent figures waited in the leaves. One of them whispered. "They're starting to understand." Riker's single glowing eye focused on the retreating squad. "Let them." The forest seemed to breathe around the mercenaries as they pushed forward. But the once familiar terrain began to twist and warp under their feet. Branches that should have been out of reach suddenly tangled with their armor. Rocks shifted just enough to make footing uncertain. The thick canopy above filtered sunlight into ghostly shafts that danced with the subtle movements of unseen watchers. Koresh frowned, scanning the dense foliage through his visor. "This isn't natural. Something's changing the environment." Fosk's HUD flickered again, the sensors fluctuating wildly. Environmental control. Localized, they're using some kind of tech to manipulate the area. A faint hum grew. Beneath the rustling leaves, low and steady like a heartbeat. Mist crept along the forest floor, weaving through tree trunks and curling into the shape of indistinct shadows. "Fog generators," Dravik muttered, his voice barely audible. "Old tech, but effective." Koresh gritted his teeth. "We're being funneled into a trap. Stay sharp." The squad tightened their formation, every weapon trained outward, every step deliberate. The fog thickened, swirling in patterns that disoriented and confused. Paths that had led them forward now looped back unexpectedly. Sounds echoed strangely. Footsteps seemed to come from nowhere, then vanish without a trace. "Communications?" Koresh asked. "Intermittent," replied the tech officer. "The fog disrupts signals. Our comms are slipping in and out." Fosk rubbed his helmet. "I'm seeing different landscapes on each scanner. Squad Alpha reports a clearing. Squad Beta says a rocky ridge. That's impossible. They can't be both, right?" "Psychological warfare," Koresh said grimly. "They want us to doubt what we see, to question our senses." Ahead, a pair of mercenaries broke through the mist into a small glade. Their radios crackled with static-filled shouts, but then fell silent. Koresh gestured sharply, leading a small group to investigate. As they approached, the clearing dissolved, replaced by a mirror image of the same trees and mist. But something was off. The ground was littered with discarded gear, helmets shattered and rifles bent. "Casualties," Krillin whispered. "No," Fosk said, unease curling in his stomach. "Decoys, fake bodies." Suddenly, from the treetops, a hail of small, dart-like projectiles zips through the air. The mercenaries dove for cover, but the darts were coated in a fast-acting sedative. Within seconds, one squad member collapsed, twitching but conscious. Koresh barked orders. "Medics, tend to him. Move to high ground." They scrambled up a steep hill, the mist clinging to their armor like cold sweat. At the summit, the fog thinned, revealing the strange truth. Across the valley, electronic towers pulsed with pale blue light, their beams slicing through the mist like blades. Hidden speakers emitted soft, hypnotic rhythms that seemed to penetrate the mind itself. "Signal manipulators," Fosk said, staring in disbelief. "They're controlling the environment remotely." Koresh clenched his jaw. "And they're watching." A distant echo carried through the hills, a whisper barely audible, but unmistakably human. "You can't trust what you see here." Fosk scanned the airwaves, searching for the source. Suddenly, a figure appeared briefly on the ridge opposite them. A silhouette in human combat armor, face obscured by a visor. "Ghosts," Fosk muttered. The figure vanished into the trees as quickly as it appeared. Koresh turned to his team. "We're not fighting soldiers, we're fighting a maze." "Then we use their maze against them," Dravik said, grinning despite the tension. Koresh nodded slowly. "Good. We adapt, or we die." The mercenaries began marking their path, breaking twigs, scratching symbols on trees, trying to reclaim control. But the forest resisted. Footsteps echoed behind them, too many to count, but every time they turned, there was nothing. Koresh felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. This wasn't a battle of guns. It was a battle of minds, and the humans had already won the first round. The forest had transformed into a labyrinth of shadows and whispers, and the Black Fangs were losing control. Every step forward felt like sinking deeper into a web spun by unseen masters. The mist clung cold and damp against their armor, and their senses strained against the constant barrage of unseen threats. Koresh gathered the squad into a tight circle on a rocky outcrop. His voice was low but firm. "They know us better than we know ourselves. This isn't just territory, they're controlling the battlefield itself." Fosk nodded grimly. "They're hunting us." "Then we turn the tables," Koresh said. "We find their hunters." The mercenaries' comes buzzed softly. A faint coded signal flickered through the Statican encrypted message. Fosk's fingers danced over his helmet interface. "Signal's weak, but it's definitely human." Koresh's eyes sharpened. "Proof they want us to find it." Fosk followed the signal, leading the squad carefully down the slope and through a narrow gap in the trees. The mist swirled, but the signal grew stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat. They reached a clearing. In the center, half buried in moss and dirt, lay a small Devisan old-world beacon. Cracked but functioning. Kresh crouched and picked it up. "They're baiting us." Suddenly, movement exploded from the trees. Silent figures dropped down, appearing from all sides like phantoms. They wore camouflaged armor that shimmered with the patterns of the forest, and their weapons were sleek and compact. The Black Fangs opened fire, but their shots were met with unerring precision. The ghosts moved to fast vanishing before a second shot could find them. Koresh fired blindly, then dove as a dart zipped past his shoulder. One of the attackers grappled Fosk, pulling a blade to his throat. Fosk froze, but then, with a sudden twist, he smashed the attacker's helmet with his rifle butt and broke free. Chaos erupted. But the mercenaries realized the ghosts weren't trying to kill them immediately. Instead, they were testing, probing. Wearing them down without a final strike, Koresh barked, "Fall back, regroup at the ridge." They fought their way back through the fog, its ghosts melting away into the trees as suddenly as they had come. Panting, Koresh surveyed his team. "We're outmatched in this environment, but they've shown themselves. That's a start." Fosk scanned the area, catching his breath. "They don't want us dead, not yet. They want to break us." "Fear, fatigue, confusion," Koresh mused. "That's their weapon." Suddenly, his visor pinged. A thermal reading, faint but distinct, caught on the ridge behind them. "Enemy reinforcements?" Dravik asked. "No," Koresh said. "Something else." The heat source shifted. It wasn't a single figure. It was a cluster too many to count. The ghosts were gathering. A voice whispered over their comes. "Calm and cold, you walk their ground. You will leave changed." Koresh clenched his fists. "We won't be prey." Fosk's gaze hardened. "We're fighting humans, better trained, better prepared. They don't just want to win. They want to erase us." Koresh nodded. "Then, we become what they fear. More ghosts," Fosk suggested with a grim smile. "Exactly," Koresh said. "We learn their tactics, use their environment, and when the time comes, we strike back." The squad moved cautiously, deeper into the forest's heart, following the faint thermal signals that flickered like fireflies in the mist. Behind them, Hidden eyes watched from the shadows. Captain Riker lowered his visor. Let the hunt begin. The forest seemed endless, a living maze of mist and shadow. But Koresh and his squad pressed onward. Each step was heavy, their breaths visible in the chilled air. The distant hum of the signal pulsed steadily in Fosk's ear, a beacon pulling them. Deeper into unknown territory, are we walking into a trap? Dravik muttered, adjusting his grip on the rifle. Koresh's gaze was hard, unyielding. Maybe, but it's the only way forward. The black fangs moved silently, every soldier hyper-aware of the shifting sounds around them. The ghosts had taught them fear, but Koresh was determined to learn their patterns. Their weaknesses as they crossed a clearing bathed in eerie twilight, the terrain abruptly shifted. The trees thinned, revealing the entrance to a complex carved into the side of a rocky, hill-steep walls of stone, covered in vines and moss, camouflaged from the sky. This must be their base, Fosk whispered, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and dread. Koresh nodded, and probably where they've been controlling the terrain against us. The entrance was guarded by silent sentries, barely visible behind tree trunks, weapons trained but unmoving. Koresh raised a hand, signaling a halt. We can't rush. In, he said. We need a plan. Fosk scanned the perimeter, fingers tapping rapidly. I'm picking up faint heat signatures inside. They're expecting us. Koresh swallowed his impatience. Good. We'll give them what they expect, but on our terms. They circled the complex, searching for weak points, hidden tunnels, anything to give them an advantage. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by whispered commands and the crunch of leaves underfoot. Then Fosk's voice broke through the calm silence. I found something. Led them to a narrow crevice, nearly hidden by thick roots. It descended sharply into darkness. Tunnel system, Fosk explained. Old? Mining shafts may be repurposed. Koresh smiled grimly. Then that's how we get in. They slipped inside, the air growing colder and damper with every step. The walls closed around them, rough stone illuminated only by flickering helmet lights. The distant sound of water dripping echoed ominously. Suddenly, the tunnel forked. Koresh paused, weighing options. We split into 2 teams, he ordered. Fosk, take half and circle around. We'll enter from the other side. Understood, Fosk said, voice steady despite the tension. As they parted ways, Koresh's group moved cautiously, weapons ready. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern lit by soft, artificial light. Advanced tech hummed softly control panels. Sensor arrays and communications equipment lined the walls. Koresh's heart pounded. This was the nerve center. Suddenly, a voice crackled through the speaker's comm. Unmistakably human. Welcome to the heart of the Ghost Company. You're expected. Before they could react, the cavern's entrances sealed shut with a metallic hiss. Red lights bathed the room, and a mechanical voice announced, Intruder containment activated. Koresh yelled, Positions. Prepare for defense. From hidden alcoves, ghost soldiers emerged, moving with unnatural silence. Their armor blended perfectly with the cavern walls. Their weapons trained on the mercenaries. Gunfire erupted in controlled bursts. Koresh fired at one attacker. But the ghost vanished into a smokescreen, reappearing behind another squad member. Stay close. Watch your backs, Koresh shouted. The ghosts weren't just fighting, they were orchestrating a symphony of calculated strikes. Every move was precise, designed to divide and disorient. Fosk's voice crackled over comms, tense but alive. Koresh. We're inside the lower tunnels, encountered heavy resistance. Koresh gritted his teeth. Hold position. We link up and break out. The battle raged. The Black Fang's discipline kept them alive. but the ghost's knowledge of the environment kept the pressure relentless. Then, in the chaos, Koresh caught sight of a figure standing still amid the gunfire. Captain Riker, the mysterious leader. His glowing eye scanned calmly, unaffected by the storm around him. Koresh raised his rifle, taking aim, but Riker vanished into the shadows. Koresh growled, "He's baiting us." Minutes later, the team regrouped at the tunnel junction, breathing hard but unbroken. "We can't outfight them," Koresh admitted. "But we can outthink them." Fosk nodded. "They're humans, like us. That means mistakes." Koresh's jaw tightened. "Then we find their weak spot." And deeper in the tunnels, where the shadows gathered thickest, a new strategy was born, a plan to turn hunters into prey. The damp tunnel smelled of earth and old metal. The black fangs crouched in the shadows, their breath steady but their minds racing. They were surrounded, but not defeated. The ghosts had trapped them in their own den, confident in their advantage. But Koresh knew humans never gave up so easily. "We've watched and learned," Koresh whispered. "They're organized, but predictable." Fosk adjusted his gear. "They use terrain, tech, and fear-like weapons. But they can't read our will." Koresh's visor flickered with schematics of the tunnel complex. "We hit their control center, cut their signal, their advantage disappears." "But it's heavily guarded," Dravik said. "We'll be walking into the lion's den." Koresh smiled grimly. "Oh good. Then we need a distraction." He pointed to Fosk. "You and your team cause chaos in the East Wing. Draw them out." Fosk nodded. "Got it. We'll make some noise." Koresh turned to the rest. The rest of us moved to the control hub. Silent, fast, and lethal. With the plan set, Fosk's team slipped away into the twisting tunnels, their footsteps muffled by thick layers of moss and rock. They planted small charges near power conduits, sparking explosions that echoed through the cavern like thunderclaps. Alarm sirens blared, lights flickered, and ghost soldiers scrambled from their posts. Meanwhile, Koresh and his squad moved through narrow passages, guided only by dim emergency lights. Every corner could hide a ghost. Every shadow could be their last. Koresh's heart hammered as they approached the control room, a massive chamber humming with energy and lined with consoles. At its center stood a towering console, the source of the environmental controls and the eerie fog that had plagued them. "Here," Koresh said, fingers flying over the interface. "We shut this down, they lose their grip." Behind him, the door hissed open. "Nice try." Captain Riker stepped in, flanked by two ghost soldiers, his glowing eye fixed on Koresh. "You adapt quickly, but this ends now." Koresh leveled his rifle. "Not today." The ghost surged forward and the chamber erupted into a fierce firefight. Koresh ducked behind a console, returning fire while barking orders. Suppressing fire. Move to flank. Dravik and two others circled, drawing Riker's attention. But the captain was no ordinary soldier. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, anticipating their every move. Fosk's team burst into the room, having completed their diversion. Their sudden appearance turned the tide. Ghost soldiers were forced to split their focus. Koresh seized the moment and reached the console, overriding the controls. "Fosk, now?" Fosk activated the charges planted earlier. The control room trembled as power conduits overloaded and sparks flew. The fog machines outside powered down with a hiss, and the mist began to dissipate. The ghost's advantage vanished. Riker growled in frustration, but withdrew with his remaining forces into hidden tunnels. Koresh breathed hard, watching the fog lift, revealing clear skies and the sun cutting through the canopy. "We did it," Fosk said, eyes gleaming. "They're not invincible." Koresh nodded. They never were. As the black fangs regrouped, a new resolve settled over them. The ghosts had tested their limits, pushed them to the edge, but humanity's will had proven stronger. Koresh looked out across the clearing, thinking ahead. "This fight isn't over," he said quietly. "But now, they know what we're made of." Fosk clapped him on the shoulder. "And they'll think twice before hunting humans again." In the shadows beyond the trees, a figure watched the glowing eye of Captain Riker scanning, calculating. The hunt was far from finished. The mist had vanished, but the forest still held its secrets. The Black Fangs stood at the edge of the clearing, their armor battered, their eyes sharp with hard-earned respect. They were survivors, forged in fire and shadow. Tempered by battle against enemies who were more than soldiers, they were legends. Koresh scanned the horizon, the sun casting long golden beams through the trees. The humans who had hunted them were ghosts no longer, but their spirit lived on. Captain Fosk said quietly, "What do we tell Command about the Ghost Company?" Koresh paused, weighing the weight of truth against what the galaxy would believe. "They won't believe the full story," he said finally. "But they'll believe this: we fought an enemy who used fear like a weapon, who knew our minds before. We knew their moves, and we won." Fosk nodded, a shadow of a smile crossing his face. "Humans, right. Then why do mercenaries shake in fear when they face them?" Koresh let the question hang in the air. Because the answer was simple and terrifying. Because humans never give up. They adapt. They endure. And when you think you've caught a ghost, you realize you're the one being hunted. Behind them, the forest seemed to whisper, carrying the unspoken promise of the Ghost Company still watching, still waiting, ready to rise whenever humanity's survival was threatened. As the squad prepared to move out, a soft chime echoed from Koresh's comms. "An incoming transmission. Report from orbit," Fosk said, tuning in. A calm female voice filled their ears. "Black Fangs, your data confirms what we suspected. The Ghost Company is real, and they're not alone. Other units exist, hidden, prepared, ready to protect human colonies across this sector." Koresh exchanged a look with Fosk. "So, this was just the beginning." "Exactly," the voice continued. "We're activating additional support squads. The galaxy isn't ready for what's coming next." Koresh took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the fight ahead. He looked once more toward the forest, a place that had tested them, changed them. "Humans," he said softly. "Right. Then why do mercenaries shake in fear?" Fosk smiled. "Because when humans fight, they fight with everything they have. And nothing is more terrifying than a human who refuses to lose." The Black Fangs moved forward, stepping into the clearing, stepping into a future where humanity's legend grew stronger. With every battle, and somewhere, deep in the shadows, the Ghost Company prepared for the next hunt. The end.